If you haven't heard of simulated universe theory, it's one of those things that first time you hear about it, you think it just sounds absolutely crazy. So, in short, it's the theory that we are living in some kind of computer, or like we're in a computer game, we're a character controlling our movements, our thoughts, but this is not really real in the classic sense of the word. As I say, that sounds bonkers, but the funny thing is, I think it's you have to be just open to different possibilities, because when you think about it, when I was at school and we did physics and we learnt about the Big Bang theory, so not the TV comedy, but the actual theory that the whole universe, everything that you see now, this car I'm driving, all the trees, the houses, all the surrounding planets in this galaxy, the billions of stars, planets, everything, all started off as this single point of, well, singularity, the size of a pea, let's say, some sort of atom the size of a pea. And then one day it just exploded for some reason. And then everything that we have, that we see, that we experience, all came from that one item. And that's what we were taught at school. And, at the time you think, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's what you're taught by teachers. So you just, like everything, you just kind of take it as gospel. Now, the funny thing is, in recent years, the reason why I don't know who came to that conclusion, one of the famous physicians, I don't think it was Newton, but somebody, the reason why they came to that conclusion was because they noticed that everything in space was moving at a set rate it appeared to be moving in the same direction, right? So that logically means that, well, there was this explosion and then everything is moving out from that single point. But then I think it was maybe a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, because of, these kind of deep space telescopes that they send through space now, they were able to observe these other sort of bodies of mass that were not only going in completely different directions, but at different speeds, at different rates, or what have you. So that already has now put into question that particular theory. Going back to what I was saying about where, okay, one day this thing just suddenly exploded. Well, the question comes, well, if the whole universe and everything was within that point, well, number one, what made it explode, and what was sort of outside of that, or what came before that, right? And traditional science has never been able to really explain that. But if we go back to the simulated universe theory, the theory is there is this kind of supercomputer, and somebody has created this simulation, like what we do now. We create simulation things, especially now with AI. I mean, that is going to accelerate all the different types of simulations and predictions that we can do. And when you when you look at what computers could do 40 years ago, so I remember my first computer being a Commodore VIC-20, and this first game I played was this little aeroplane that would go along, and you'd hit the space bar and it would drop a bomb on these buildings. And I just thought that was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life. I was blown away by it. Whereas now you can play games where you have, virtual reality, and it's like you're actually inside the game. And it's getting to the point where games are almost indistinguishable from what you see in real life. Especially if you walk in on someone playing a football game on a PlayStation. I've done that before and actually thought someone was just watching TV. So it's not inconceivable that you can get to a point where things are simulated to the extent where, especially with VR, how that's getting better and better, you wouldn't be able to tell if you were in a simulation or whether it's real life or not. So going back to the theory itself, the way you could explain the beginning of time as we know it within this simulation would be simply when somebody wrote the program, wrote the code, and then effectively started running the program. That is the beginning of time. Now, again, I know as I say this, it sounds bonkers, but no more bonkers than the idea that we all came from, some sort of hard-boiled pea that exploded. That also doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, if you're watching this video, you've probably already heard about the double slit experiment. So apologies if you have, and you're like, oh, here we go again. I'll keep it as brief as possible. But the thing with a computer game is it's only creating or rendering what you're looking at that moment in time. So whatever's behind you doesn't really exist until in the game you turn around, and then the computer is generating, that image of what's behind you. There's the old saying about, if a tree falls down in a forest and there's no one there to observe it or hear it, does it actually make a sound? How would you prove it? The only way you would prove it would be to have some sort of video or tape recorder, and have lots of them kind of in a forest, and then wait for a tree to fall down, and then you would be able to record it. In other words, it has to have something or someone observing it for you to prove if it makes a sound or not. That's the only way. Otherwise, it's just faith, isn't it? It's just blind faith that something makes a noise if you're not there to listen to it. Now, with the double slit experiment, basically what they did was they were wanting to measure how, I think it was photons of light pass through, a slit on a sheet. And the idea being is they was expecting it, if you're firing at a single slit, then you would expect to see a kind of line of photons hitting the back wall. Think of it like shooting paintballs through a slit, if you like. You would expect that line. And then they were doing it with two, and basically what happened was it did not behave when they were watching it and using these apparatus to record the results. It behaved in an exact opposite way to what they were expecting. So that was before they were measuring it. So the results were the opposite to what they were expecting. So they thought, well, that's kind of weird. It was more like spreading out like a wave, like when you drop a pebble on a pond. That's a bit of a tongue twister. So then they set up this apparatus to observe it and see what was happening. And the crazy thing was when they observed it with these, I don't know what they were using, some like a camera, but it was some way of measuring what was going on so they could see. Only when they were observing it did it then start behaving as they were originally expecting. So then they switched the apparatus off, and it went back to doing it the other way. So again, that is very much like needing somebody to observe something for it to actually make a sound, like the example with the tree in the woods. And what was even weirder than that was they were able to, I think they then put the cameras after the point. So it was almost like, even though the camera was beyond the point where it would make a change, it's almost like you could affect something that had happened in the past. I mean, it's just, you need to look it up on the internet, and there's some good videos on YouTube. It's absolutely mind-melting. But the main thing I want to talk about in this video, and I've already talked for 9 minutes already, and sorry, because I'm not like 14 years old, I'm not going to be editing out my pauses and mumbles and whatnot. Plus I'm driving, and don't worry, hands-free, but the main point of this is, if you could prove somehow that none of this was really real, and everything was all in our imagination, and therefore, whilst there are consequences within this game, if you like, think of it like when if you're playing a computer game, and apologies if you're not someone who plays computer games, but just imagine for a moment you're playing some sort of game, and there's this chasm that you have to jump over. Well, in a game, there's no real consequences, right? You jump because you're not going to die if you don't make the fall. Now, in life, there are many things that we shy away from because it's considered a bit risky. Maybe it's some sort of investment. You think, well, what if it goes wrong? Or will I lose my money and then I'm going to lose my house? And as a human, we go through all of these kind of scenarios, like worst case scenarios and stuff. But if you knew that actually none of this was real, and we're just in a simulation, wouldn't you take maybe more risks than you normally would? Simply because it just wouldn't feel like it's so, kind of final that if you made a mistake. And when you think about it, I mean, I don't want to be morbid, but we're all going to end up the same way anyway. One of my favorite sayings I heard years ago is, humans tiptoe safely towards death. And what that means is we're all so cautious all the time and overthink everything when we're all going to die anyway. So, when you look at the people that are successful in life, it's normally because they've taken risks. I don't really like it when people are like, you see someone who's successful and they're like, oh, they're just born like that, or they're born into that, or they're rich, or, blah, blah, blah. They've probably made a lot of sacrifices, and they've also probably made a lot of risks as well. Now, there are people that just come into money, or, they're born into it. That I get. But how would you live your life? There's a business coach, guy called Dan Pena. His language is a bit ripe. He's an American, I think originally from Mexico actually, and now lives in Scotland in a castle. And he runs these very sort of high-end coaching sessions, teaching people how to do investments and how to buy companies with sort of borrowed money and whatnot. But he's a big one on. He's got this saying: how would your life be? How would your life be different if you weren't afraid of anything? If you weren't afraid of losing money or your mortgage or what you say to people or anything, basically, if you weren't afraid of anything or anyone, how would your life be different? Because we really limit ourselves. Our capacity is really limited by our imagination. Now, again, if we were in a computer simulation, and there has been evidence that our thoughts, everything starts from a thought. It starts from your imagination. Any invention that you can think of started in somebody's head, right? And we know that our brains actually give off, and our hearts give off an electrical pulse and can physically attract things. There are things happening in the air that we can't see, and it's only through modern science that we can measure these things. And now, of course, you can see that people are able even to control things on a screen just by thinking about it. They can make a ball move left and right, or they can pick letters on a screen, which is amazing for people that, obviously they've lost use of their limbs and things. Have you ever thought about somebody, so they just popped into your head, you've not seen them for years, and then you just walk around the corner and bump into them? That's happened to me so many times. There's been people that I've not seen or thought about for years, and then literally I walk around the corner and I see them, and of course you say to them, oh, I can't believe it, I was thinking of you earlier, and it doesn't seem that amazing to them, but to you it's like, oh my God, that's the most incredible thing. So is it possible that if we are in a simulation, that you really can create your reality through thoughts? And just imagine that for a moment, that you're not just controlling yourself and what you do, but you can physically decide what happens in the universe, right? You're just positive about everything. Whatever you want to do, you just go 100% at it with the belief, the inner belief, that it is just going to happen. Now, let's say, for example, this theory isn't correct and we're not really living in a simulated universe, and this is all really real. Everything is actually real in the true sense of the word. But if you believed that we're living in a simulated universe and none of this really has any real consequences. But what is the difference if you don't know if it's real or not? A way I like to think about it is, I remember years ago you could buy like signed albums on the internet, a signed CD or what have you. And then it turned out that a lot of people, unfortunately, were faking them. You know, they would have a photo, some sort of proof where they were getting it signed. You bought it in good faith, and as far as you were concerned, you've got some album signed by whoever it might be. But if you have bought something like that and you bought it genuinely thinking that it really was them, and there's been nothing to disprove that, well, actually, to you, what is the difference? So, as I say, if you really believe something is real, that is all you need to take the steps that you need to make that thing happen. Just the pure belief and doing it with 100% conviction. Now, what I'd like you to do is just get playful with it. Just play around with it. Just imagine, just for fun. I mean, as adults, unfortunately, that's one thing that we don't tend to do enough, if at all, is just imagining things and just fantasizing about things. When you're a kid, of course, you can turn a cardboard box into, a spaceship or a boat or submarine or what have you. Just spend the next 2 or 3 days thinking about what it is you want in life, what you want to achieve, and then just believing that it will happen for you, and take the steps necessary to make that thing a reality. You're not going to lose anything by it, and just observe what happens, and see what is possible. Okay, so that's it for today. Hope you're all well. I'll speak to you soon.